Hey guys, so it's about 4:31 p.m. Pacific time on this day before Halloween, October 30th, Thursday, October 30th, 2025, and it is about I think 78 degrees there outside. Yeah, 78 degrees outside. Now, before I start, I would like to ask you to do me a favor if you can, and that is to like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. It'd be greatly appreciated with the algorithm that YouTube has, because apparently the audio video I did on the Avengers Secret War fan-made poster being used at a convention, at convention expo. Excuse me, almost had a brain fart there. At the convention expo in Brazil by Disney, apparently, according to somebody that commented on it, it actually made the front page of the YouTube site. Basically, like when you come in, as a regular YouTube, just as a guest or something like that or whatever, it was right there at the, in the front. So that was pretty cool to see, or pretty cool to hear. But with that said, though, like I mentioned, if you can do me a solid favor, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share it, it would greatly help me out. Also, if you want to find my content outside of YouTube, you can find me at all your favorite various podcast affiliates. Links are in the description. You can find me on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Audible Music, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent SiriusXM. Basically, wherever you listen to podcasts at, more than likely you'll find mine there as well. Also, I have other video outlets. If you have video uploading outlets outside of YouTube, you can find me at rumble.com and VENMO.com, where you'll basically get about identical content that you see here on the main channel. But the difference is there's some content that YouTube would be questionable about or wouldn't allow, period. So you'll be able to find it over at Rumble and VENMO. You can also support me over at Odyssey and Daily Motion. Also, I have a Twitch.tv. I got to get that up and running again. And I got a Kick.com, which I haven't, started yet. But when I do, I'll let you know. But you can find me there as well. Also, you can find me, if you're into art, you can find me at deviantart.com at BVW1979. And you can find me at inkbunny.net at BWRosets. Also, guys, I have a Patreon. If you want to help support me there at Patreon, there's several tiers there. I think you'll be appreciative of how affordable they are. And I do have plans to help improve, the tiers and everything going forward as far as Patreon goes. Like basically what kind of content and everything you'll be seeing. I have plans, and when those plans are finalized in my head, I'll let you know. You can also support me by using outlets like Venmo and Cash App if you would like. It would be greatly appreciated if you would like to do that. Also, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow me over at Twitter, aka X.com, and at Blue Sky. Links are in the description. And you can support me by going to my 2 online stores. I have my new Fourth Wall store. I have 1 item up there right now, but there will be more coming in the future. I'm just gradually easing in right now, so that way if there's any hiccups, I can correct them. But hopefully there won't be. But the link is at the at the top. You want to check that out. And then the OG Teespring store, links are at the bottom for that. So you can check that out for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. Also, guys, during the video premiere here, if you would like, the live chat will be open. So if you want to come in, say hi, and give your thoughts on what I had to say here in the video while it's happening, premiering, if you will, you're welcome to do so. And if you would like, Super Chats are also going to be open. So if you want to come in and donate, whatever you could, be greatly appreciated. That's up to you. Now, for those of you that will be listening after the premiere is over, if you want to give your thoughts, comments will be opened afterwards, and they'll also be open during the premiere. But primarily, for those that missed, they will be open. And, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to donate and you weren't here for the premiere, super thanks will be open to do so. But with that said, let's get into the topic at hand, shall we? So, a couple of days ago, the YouTube channel 7 Item Stone did a video asking the question that I've actually talked about before in the past here on my channel, and that is, can a female lead, let me make sure read this, can a new female hero revitalize Yu-Gi-Oh anime? Can a new female hero revitalize Yu-Gi-Oh anime? And like I've said before, or like I just mentioned, I've talked about this in a video myself. If I can find it, I'll link it at the bottom here. Or at the end, I should say. I'll link it at the end of the video. But, I've talked about this before. And I am in total agreement that yes, the time has come finally for the people behind the Yu-Gi-Oh anime series and the manga to basically, just open the door and let a female character take it front and center. The time is definitely right now. And the reason I say that is because you look at the designs of some of the characters recently in some of these other Yu-Gi-Oh animes, you look at them, and until the description is given out, you could mistakenly look at them as being female. I'm not trying to be, offensive in that. No offense. All due respect, no offense. But when you look at the designs, the first thing you might think for some of them is, oh, we're going to get a female lead, but then you find out that's not the case. That's not the case. So, obviously, fans of Yu-Gi-Oh, that is, they're not going to come out and say it, straightforward, like some are, like Seven Item Stone has. But everyone will probably agree that, the people behind Yu-Gi-Oh, that being Konami and Shonen Jump, they need to basically let that door be blasted down and let a female take it front and center. Now, he did acknowledge that Konami Animation, that recently got established, has been doing some animes called Chronicles, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Chronicles, featuring female leads in the various, I guess you could say, series that they've been doing. It's kind of like an anthology series. It's like you have one that's based on Sky, one that's Dogma Tea or something, and then you got another one that comes after that, and then another one comes after that. And the majority of them so far have had female leads. So could that be a sign that maybe the next anime manga for Yu-Gi-Oh is going to have a female lead? We'll have to see. And maybe we won't have to wait too long to see, because in 2 months, basically 5 to 4 days before Christmas, they're going to have Jump Fiesta. And this is obviously an annual convention, expo for Shonen Jump that they do, I think in Japan primarily. And then that's when things get revealed. And obviously, thanks to the internet, we'll find out exactly, what those reveals will be as far as any Shonen Jump properties are concerned. And if Yu-Gi-Oh is at the front and center of those announcements and, reveals as to what's to come. Now, like you said, Chronicles, for the majority of its run, has had female leads. And from a card perspective, they're doing very well. But he did mention that not many people recognize it as a Yu-Gi-Oh anime because they're more used to the anime where the characters are dueling each other in a card game. That's pretty much been the MO since almost the beginning. Not the 1999 one or anything like that, because that was, basing itself off the original manga and everything, to where the card game didn't come into play until about chapter 3 or part 3, of the original manga, and it kind of does, the same with the original body horror anime that it was known for. He also brings up that shonen, from a Japanese term, is basically a name primarily acknowledging that what you're seeing under the Shonen Jump brand is for boys. Well, shoujo, I think that's what it's called. Shoujo is meant for girls. Shoujo is meant for girls, like Sailor Moon and all that. But, when he says that, these chronicles have been having mostly female leads, it feels like, in my opinion, that maybe those at Shonen Jump are getting ready to hopefully do exactly what a lot of fans want them to do. And that's break the wall down. Basically, break that barrier down and let a female be the center point. Let a female be the one that does the dueling. Let her be the one that has the spiritual partner alongside her to combat, the evils that they got to combat for that season. And to me, if they let this happen, it makes things a lot more interesting. it makes things a lot more interesting, because in today's society, you can do whatever you want, basically, from a lead character and supporting character perspective. You can do that. You could go, you can go in directions that normally you wouldn't have gone in the past. You go in directions you normally wouldn't have gone in the past. For example, if they want to go, let's say, and I say this with all due respect, no offense. I say it with all due respect, no offense. Let's say they wanted to go the LGBTQ route with the main lead and her best friend. They could do that. And you know what? Anime hasn't been known to do that. And I'm not talking from a adult anime, yuri, hentai kind of perspective. No. I'm talking the fact that they've done this in well-renowned anime. I mean, again, an anime he used as an example for shoujo, basically the female acknowledgement of shonen. The anime he used for shoujo is Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon had two Sailor Scouts. Basically, they were like veterans, very experienced, very statuesque Sailor Scouts, if you will. I can't think of the names right now. That when their characters were brought over in the anime later on here in America, they were dubbed to be like cousins or sisters. But they were very close cousins or sisters. But the original anime and manga didn't portray them as that. The original anime and manga portrayed them as lovers, as lesbian lovers. But when their episodes, as part of the anime came over here, like I said, that was changed. Now I don't know if maybe that's become acceptable now and everything with the way the world is, or the world has changed over time. I don't know. I haven't paid much attention to Sailor Moon in a while, but I know about the history of those two characters when it comes to it. I know about the history of those two characters when it comes to it and all that. So so to me, I'm trying to find the right words to say. So to me, the opportunity could present itself if they wanted to do something like that. They could. And I get what people are thinking. They're thinking, well, if they do this, would that mean it would just that the lead, that the lead protagonist would just have an all-female cast with her as her friends? No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't, because what made a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh shows, a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh animes very popular, especially with was the cast. That's what I was trying to say. Was the cast. And the cast was diverse in gender. And that's what made them popular. Because you didn't just have Yu-Gi-Oh! You didn't just have Yugi and Joey and Tristan. No. You had Yugi, you had Joey, you had Tristan, you had Taya, you had Mai. In the original 1999 anime and manga, you had this one girl, this Bumako, whatever her name is. You had her. And then later on, you had characters like Rebecca and Serenity, And when they did the final season, you had the apprentice that became her spirit, basically in ancient Egypt, her spirit was the reason Dark Magician Girl existed, just like her mentors was. So you had all kinds of female representation in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, the more established one, if you will. And the same would go, I should say, for the likes of, GX. The same would go for 5Ds, for Zexal, for Arc V, and even the one for Veins. I think that's what it is, Veins. And then the most recent one, they always made sure to have a diverse cast of male and female. Not just those to support the friend, but those that could also duel, which I thought was kind of cool. I think that was kind of good. And I would expect the same here if they decide to go with a female lead. I would expect, for her to have a female BFF, maybe someone that's a little bit more than that, but also to have male companions, male friends that not only will support her, but duel. So I think basically they would keep that diverse situation of having both male and female friends, alongside her. I think they would definitely keep that. But the question then would be, okay, that's fine. But what would be the situation? How would this all come into being? Like, what would be the time frame and everything? Would it be a futuristic time frame? Would it be a present day time frame? Would it be a time frame that takes place in the past? What would it be? And those are good questions. And if I was to change things up, if you will, then I would go with basically setting the anime and manga with the female lead. I would say set it in the past. As a matter of fact, I would say set it to when the duel games first began. Do it that way. And you might be surprised about what kind of stories you can get out of that. You might be surprised about what stories you can get out of that. And everything. It would be really interesting to see that kind of situation, that kind of series take place during the time in which, if you go back to the more established OG Yu-Gi-Oh that we saw here in the States, you basically saw that ancient Egypt was the reason that what would be known as duel monsters came to be, because of all that. So just think about incorporating that storyline or incorporating the series with these characters with a good storyline in that time in that time setting, if you will, in that time frame. That to me would really be interesting, because then you would have a female protagonist and her friends, not only existing in that time frame, if you will, but they would be bearing witness to a lot of what would become. I'm trying not to have a brain fart here, trying to come up with the right words. But basically, you would have this main female protagonist along with her crew, not only dueling in that time, in that time era and all that, but you would have them bear witness, to the origins, as to what would be duel monsters. You would be adding to the lore. That's the word I was trying to find. The lore of the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise that pretty much was established, like I said, in the more established version of Yu-Gi-Oh, OG Yu-Gi-Oh that we know of. So to me, I think if you place it in ancient Egypt times, and have a good story that centers around it and have it somehow connect all the way back to the established OG Yu-Gi-Oh that we know of, to me that works. That would be something that works and would really get people invested, not only to see what happens next in the manga and in the anime, but also to see what kind of see what kind of cards will be sold as a result by Konami, for people to collect and play in tournaments with. Because that's the number one thing about these kind of Shonen Jumps and Shoujo's animes. These animes meant for boys and girls, men and women and all that. It's meant at the end of the day to sell merchandise. And Yu-Gi-Oh is one of those big merchandise sellers that when you come up with a new deck of cards, and everything, you come up with that, depending on what you say the card deck's going to evolve or have in it, or at least hint at of what's going to be in it, then there's no doubt that card deck, if that collectible one, it's going to sell. That tin is going to sell. The collectible tin with a name like Legendary Duelist is going to sell. It will. It will. So to me, this would be a great opportunity for that kind of stuff to happen. It'd be a great opportunity. But at the end of the day, it's up to Konami, it's up to Shonen Jump, to let this happen. But when I look at the potential of having a female lead finally in Yu-Gi-Oh, with a diverse cast of male and female friends, and maybe the female BFF being a little bit more if you want to go that route, to me that potential, that potential will be worth seeing grow. Basically, the growth that you'll see come out of it, it will be worth it. That risk that they're afraid to take, I should say, not tack, but take, will be worth taking. They'll see the positive that comes out of it and all that. And then to place it, in a time frame like ancient Egypt, to tie into what we learned about lore-wise in the original, more established Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the 2000s, tie that in and let her and her friends, her compadres, be bear witness, to the beginning of the Duel Monsters and actually take part in it. To me, that has the potential to be great storytelling in anime and manga form. It really does. And also, like I said, from a merchandise perspective, a card selling perspective, the cards you could sell, to be part of the trading card game that people could use in tournaments in the future, that will be worth the change in itself. That will be worth the change. That'll be worth the change itself at the end of the day. It will be. It'll be worth the change, the change in structure, the change in gender protagonist. That it'll be worth it. I truly believe that. But again, it's up to Konami, it's up to Shonen Jump, to take that chance. And if right now, they're using these canonical animes that tie into Yu-Gi-Oh, if they're using them to have established female leads in each of them in this anthology series, because that's what it sounds like to me, that it is. If they're using each of these different anthology episodes, in Chronicles to have female leads, then to me what that says is they're testing the waters. They're testing the waters to see whether or not fans will want to see a female lead. Now, again, what Seven Item Stone said is that nobody considers this to be, a Yu-Gi-Oh anime, but apparently, there are parts of this Chronicles anthology that they do like. So you got to wonder if, hearing the positive, kind of mixed reaction, but more positive reaction and acceptance of the Chronicles, that even though they don't consider it true Yu-Gi-Oh, you got to wonder if that plays into the ears of Konami and Shonen Jump, and it makes them think to themselves, hey, maybe it's time we do let a female take front and center. Maybe it's time we let her be the main character, be the main duelist. We let her have the spirit of ancient Egypt or whatever spirit they can come up with that guides her. Let's say if they have it take place in ancient Egypt during the origins, the beginnings of the Duel Monsters' existence. And again, you got to think maybe if they consider that, they also got to think, if we do this, that could also mean, we can get creative with the cards that get introduced, and that might lead us to some good profits. Because again, at the end of the day, it's about selling. It's about merchandise selling. So, again, it's up to them. It's up to them at the end of the day whether or not they want to do it. But if they decide they want to stay with their tried and true, then hey, they're going to stay with their tried and true. But if there's anything I've seen, just by hearing about all these different spin-offs from Yu-Gi-Oh, like GX and 5Ds and Zexal and Arc V and Veins and even the more recent one, if there's anything I've heard about when it comes to these continuations or these spin-offs, if you will, is that even though they've always had a male protagonist and everything, just like with the original, the established OG one that we know of, even though they've always had a male protagonist as the lead, that the female protagonist that stands alongside them is equally as strong in duel monster dueling as the protagonist. She's just as equal in a sense when you give her that opportunity. So, so to me, hearing about that, seeing that, and then of course seeing what they're doing with Chronicles, obviously to me these are all good signs that they might be finally strongly considering, going the route with the female protagonist as the lead. But if they don't, what I was trying to say before I lost track a little bit there, if they don't, then what they need to do is make sure that his female counterpart is just as equal in dueling strength, in duel monsters, I should say. They got to make sure she's just as, strong and prolific, in duel monsters, as the main, as our main character will be. That's what I'm trying to say. As our main character will be. So that's what they need to do. If we don't get a female lead, then make sure the female counterpart, best friend, love interest, if you will, is just as equal, in duel monster dueling as our main protagonist. That's what they need to do. That's what they need to do. And even if they do decide to break it down and say, hey, let's go with a female lead, same thing. make sure her best friend, potential love interest, if you will, is equal in stature when it comes to dual monster dueling. That, that to me would really, that to me right there, if they decide to break the barriers finally, that to me, would really make things a lot more interesting as well, especially if you set it in the ancient Egypt times during the origins, the beginnings of the dual monster tournament, or the dual monster's existence, in my, from my perspective, But that's all I'm going to really say in it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are down below if you haven't already in the comment section. And do me a solid favor, as I said at the beginning, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and also, guys, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube and to support me elsewhere outside of YouTube as well. But guys, that's all I'm going to say for now. I do apologize if I was a little all over the place. This is what happens. You guys have followed me for a long time. This is how I am. I'm an unscripted guy and everything. I talk about things that come off the top of my head and all that. I don't go with scripts. I don't do bullet points. I'm just naturally me. So thank you all for accepting that for, God, what has it been now? 17 years? So thank you for accepting that for so long. So again, I do apologize if I was a little over the place, but let me know once again, like I said, what your thoughts are. And until next time, I will talk to you all later. God bless. Take care.